Clearly, it is a blow to Rishi Sunak after what has been previously thought a pretty successful week for the Conservatives. You know, the NI tax cut taking effect, defence spending analysis went rather well. The Rwanda bill finally passed into law. But now, of course, we're talking about Dan Poulter's defection, and very much a defection based on the state of the NHS. And that's one of Labour's strongest selling points out there, given the high public satisfaction with the NHS. So it means that suddenly the broadcasters for the next 5 days or so, rather than talking about Rwanda, rather than talking about defence spending, we're talking about one of the Tories' biggest weaknesses, which is the NHS, ahead of the local elections on Thursday morning.
Dan Poulter, who has just announced that he is defecting. He is crossing the floor from the Conservative Party to the Labour Party. Dan Poulter was a former health minister. Let's now speak to Kevin Schofield, who is political editor at Huffington Post UK. Kevin, did anyone see this news coming?
No. Is a simple answer to that. It's come completely out of the blue. Great scoop by the Observer, and a massive blow to Rishi Sunak, who's just had probably the best week he's had in a very long time. And this is the worst possible end to that week for him. It's always a hammer blow when one of your MPs crosses the floor, and in a general election year, I think it's even worse. And I think what's particularly significant about this is obviously he is a doctor. In his interview with the Observer, he talks about how he has had 20 night shifts over the past year in accident and emergency departments, and that has basically been truly life-changing, as he describes it. And he says that Labour are the only party now who he trusts with the NHS, and we know from opinion polls that the NHS is, I think, second, if not first, in the list of priorities for voters. So yeah, a real hammer blow for Sunak, losing an MP at this particular time in the political cycle.
And of course, we're just less than a week away from quite very important local elections and mayoral elections. And as you say, many strategists at Number 10 felt that Rishi Sunak had a good week, that it had quelled some of the talk of, rebellion and a potential leadership challenge to Rishi Sunak after these May local elections. What are you hearing from Number 10? How will they react to this news?
Well, I mean, they will be absolutely stunned by it. Naturally, they will try to play it down, try to limit the significance of this announcement. However, there's no way of putting a positive spin on this. It is bad news when one of your MPs crosses the floor to your rival party, and also, it reduces the Tory majority as well, and probably reduces the number of letters that need to go in to the 1922 committee to trigger a vote of no confidence, were it to come to that after the local elections. As you say, that's the big focal point now as far as Westminster is concerned. If things are as bad as predicted for the Conservatives, if they were, for instance, to lose, say, 400, 500 seats, as well as potentially the mayoralties in the Tees Valley and the West Midlands, then things could get pretty nasty for Rishi Sunak pretty quickly, I think.
Well, Kevin, really good to speak to you and get that update on that story about Dan Poulter. That's Kevin Schofield, who is political editor at the Huffington Post UK. And just to bring you up to date, Dan Poulter, who's a Conservative MP, he was a Conservative MP, former health minister, has just announced that he is crossing the floor of the House of Commons. He is leaving the Conservative Party and he will take the Labour whip until the next general election. He is standing down at the next general election, but that is a very interesting development in the world of politics. Let's get some analysis now from James Heale, who is political correspondent at The Spectator. James, good evening.
Good evening, Aisha.
What do you make of this?
Well, clearly it is a blow to Rishi Sunak after what has been previously thought a pretty successful week for the Conservatives. You know, the NI tax cut taking effect, defence spending analysis went rather well. The Rwanda bill finally passed into law. But now, of course, we're talking about Dan Poulter's defection, and very much a defection based on the state of the NHS. And that's one of Labour's strongest selling points out there, given the high public satisfaction with the NHS. So it means that suddenly the broadcasters for the next 5 days or so, rather than talking about Rwanda, rather than talking about defence spending, we're talking about one of the Tories' biggest weaknesses, which is the NHS, ahead of the local elections on Thursday morning.
And how do you think Number 10 will react to this? How do you think they'll handle it and play it?
Well, I think first of all, they need to get a reaction in the sense that this obviously came as a complete move out of the blue. They came as a shock announcement, 5 o'clock. No one really saw this coming. And I think the Labour defectors unit can really be congratulating themselves this afternoon because they pulled off quite an audacious coup. I would say my snap reaction is that this isn't as damaging as Christian Wakefield publicly crossing in the House, nor Lee Anderson choosing to go to reform, but it is still a blow. And of course, it joins one of the many Cameron-era Tories like Jim O'Neill, Andrew Cooper, Claire Perry O'Neill, all of whom are now probably going to be voting Labour at the next general election.
Look, James, great to get your analysis on that. Thanks very much for your time. That's James Heale, who's political correspondent for The Spectator. Keir Starmer has just issued a statement. He says it's fantastic to welcome Dr Dan Poulter MP to today's Change Labour Party. Time to end the Conservative chaos, turn the page and get Britain's future back. I'm really pleased that Dan has decided to join us on this journey. It's worth saying that Dan Poulter had said that he's standing down, so he's not standing at the next general election. So that's just one point.